So take a few minutes to make sure you're sitting in a comfortable position and your body is relaxed. If there's any tension anywhere in your body, let it go, let it melt, sink down into the earth, disappear. And relax your mind as well. That means letting go of thoughts or worries. So there may be problems in your life, things you're concerned about, worried about, but you can put those aside for now. It doesn't help to continuously think about and worry about those things. So put them aside. You can always take them up again later, but really try to decide it for this period of time that we're sitting here. You keep your mind focused on what we're doing. Keep your mind in the present, the here and now, and not let your mind get distracted by other things. So of course other thoughts will arise. Those thoughts and worries will pop up. But you can just say to them, no, not now, later, come back later. So, so do that now. Just let your mind settle down in the present. And a good way of doing that is being aware of the breath. Watching the breath coming in and going out. One breath after another. Bring your mind, your attention back to the breath whenever it wanders away. And then let's take a few more minutes to generate a positive motivation. So first of all, check your reasons for being here. Why did you come here? Why are you sitting here? If we're honest with ourselves, we will notice that our motivations aren't always so positive and altruistic. But that's okay. We can always change that. We can change our motivation. We can put aside selfish or worldly aspirations and bring into our mind positive ones that are caring not only for ourselves but also for others, wanting to benefit others. We do all feel that way, at least sometimes. The wish to relieve the suffering of others, the suffering of the world, to bring greater peace and happiness to others and to the world. So bring that kind of thought, that kind of feeling into your mind and see if you can make that your motivation for being here, to help not just yourself but others and the world. Okay, so I made some slides of some of the main points that I'll be talking about over this weekend. So I thought that can sometimes help you to focus and remember the points. And also, you can get a soft copy of the slides later if you want to take them home with you. So I'm going to repeat some of the same things I talked about last night to a smaller group because today there are more people here and also online, people joining online. And even for those who were at my talk last night, it may not hurt to hear the same things again. It's helpful to hear the same things again and again. So for the session this morning, I'll spend part of the time talking and explaining some things about meditation. And we'll also do some meditation towards the end of the session, and there may be time for questions as well. And if there isn't time this morning, you can hang on to your questions and I'll take care of them this afternoon. Okay, so first of all, what is the reason for practicing meditation? Is there the slides to put on the screen? Okay, hang on. Anyway, I'll just keep talking and then they'll get up there eventually. Okay, so the reason for practicing meditation. And so meditation isn't something that's found only in Buddhism. It's found in most, if not all, other religions and spiritual traditions. So what we're looking at here is the Buddhist way of talking about meditation. So just be aware of that. Understand that, there are other ways of practicing meditation and other ways of, other reasons for practicing it. And even within Buddhism, there are many different traditions. So what we're going to be looking at here is according to Mahayana Buddhism. And even within Mahayana Buddhism, because that's spread to many different countries like China and Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and so on. So specifically, we're looking at the Tibetan tradition, how Mahayana Buddhism came into Tibet and was developed in the Tibetan tradition. And then even within Tibet, there are different schools, 4 main ones and a few other smaller ones. And each of those schools would have some differences in the way they talk about meditation and practice meditation and so on. And so here we're specifically, we practice the Gelug tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. So it's complicated, but it's good to be aware of that, just so that you don't think what I'm saying here about meditation applies to all forms of meditation in all religions and all traditions everywhere in the world. So then when it comes to the reason for practicing meditation, why do we practice meditation? So that's important to look at. So it's important to understand that from the point of view of Buddhism, but also for oneself. It's good to look into your own mind and your own heart and ask yourself, why am I interested in meditation? Because it's possible that some reasons for wanting to meditate may not be appropriate. Yeah. And if we get into the practice of meditation with an inappropriate reason, inappropriate motivation, then things might go wrong. And so it's good to examine our own mind, our own thoughts and feelings and aspirations. And like I just mentioned, if we do happen to have motivations that aren't really appropriate, that might be self-centered or might be worldly, materialistic, then we can always change those. Yeah, just because those are there in the beginning doesn't mean they have to be there forever. We can, discard inappropriate thoughts and motivations and replace them with more appropriate ones. So we can talk about short-term motivations or goals for practicing meditation, and then long-term ones. So within Buddhism, the sort of ultimate long-term goal of practicing meditation are high states of mind, such as nirvana and enlightenment. So nirvana is the state in which one is free of all suffering, all sorrow, all physical pain, mental pain, and the very causes of suffering, which according to Buddhism are afflictive states of mind, such as ignorance, greed, hatred, jealousy, and so forth. So those kind of factors lie within our mind, and as long as they are there, they are like suffering factories. They keep producing suffering again and again and again. And so that's like, a goal in Buddhism is to free ourselves from all suffering and the very causes of suffering, these afflictive states of mind. So that state of freedom is what we call nirvana. And Buddhism says we all have the potential to attain that. Everybody, every living being, in fact, has the ability, the potential to free themselves from all suffering and the causes of suffering. So the Buddha did that, and then he showed the way, how we can do it as well. And then there's also enlightenment. So this is another state of mind, although sometimes nirvana is called enlightenment, but then there's the enlightenment that the Buddha achieved, which we can also call Buddhahood or full, complete enlightenment. or awakening, it's sometimes called. So the state that the Buddha achieved is like full enlightenment. And that's a higher state with greater qualities, greater abilities to help others. And in fact, that's the whole reason, that's the whole purpose of attaining that state, is to be able to help others. And so some people have this, this strong altruistic tendency, this sense of, I really want to help others be free of suffering and its causes, and not just myself. And so for people who have that inclination, then there's that as a goal, the attainment of Buddhahood, following in the steps of the Buddha, following the same path that the Buddha followed, the Bodhisattva's path. So the term Bodhisattva, you may have heard, this is a person who wants to become a Buddha, who aspires to become a Buddha. It's a bit like a medical student, somebody who wants to become a doctor and help relieve the sickness and pain and injuries of people. And so they have to study and, train and learn many things to actually become a doctor. So a bodhisattva is like that. A bodhisattva is somebody who's learning and training and developing their abilities and skills so that one day they can become a Buddha and then help all living beings. And that's actually the goal in Mahayana Buddhism, the tradition that we follow here. So we talk a lot about the Bodhisattva's path and the Bodhisattva's aspiration and becoming a Buddha and so on. So that plays into many of the prayers and the practices we do here. So those are long-term goals of practicing meditation. And again, it's possible for everybody to attain those goals, although it's not easy and it's not quick. It takes time. In fact, the Buddha spent many lifetimes following the path, developing his abilities, his qualities, his realizations, and so on, before he finally reached enlightenment. So it's not a quick and easy thing, but we can still start to practice, start to follow the path and create the causes with that goal in mind, that long-term goal in mind. And in the meantime, there are also more short-term goals, or we could say reasons for practicing meditation. And these can be experienced in a relatively short period of time, like even in this lifetime, even in a couple of years or months or days, so even in a weekend, it's possible to experience some like short-term benefits of practicing meditation. So the short-term benefits, or we could say the short-term reasons for practicing meditation, are to, as I was saying last night, to bring about a transformation of our mind. And the meaning of that is there's a two-pronged approach. One is to decrease those aspects of our mind that are disturbing and painful, the cause of suffering, even in a short-term sense, to decrease those and to increase positive aspects of the mind. Those are the ones that bring happiness and peace. So some examples of the disturbing ones, the painful ones, are anger or hatred, greed, jealousy, self-centeredness, being super caught up in our own self, and so on. So those are some of the major ones, aspects of our mind that are troublesome, troublemakers, we could say, because they bring pain and problems for ourselves in our own lives, but also to others. Yeah, I think we all have experiences of getting angry and then the anger getting so strong that it sort of takes over our mind, and we find ourselves having lots of angry thoughts and impulses, and even acting out those angry thoughts and doing things and saying things that cause suffering and problems to others. And in the moment when that's happening, when we are caught up in our anger and acting out our anger and hurting others, doing things hurtful to others, we may feel justified, and this seems to be the right thing to do. But then afterwards, we probably think differently. We probably feel differently, and we may feel a lot of regret. And also, we may have made a big mess in that relationship that may never be completely cleared up. So I think we've all had experiences like that. And so I think we can nod our heads when we hear that, yeah, anger is a troublesome state of mind. Yeah, so there's a list of the things I'm talking about right now, the purposes of meditation. So the ultimate purpose is nirvana and enlightenment, and then short-term purpose. First on the slide it has cultivating helpful qualities, and then lower down it's decreasing unhelpful qualities. So let's look at the helpful qualities. In Buddhism, it's explained that there's a lot of positive, helpful aspects of our mind. Sometimes they use words like virtuous, wholesome, so you can pick whatever word you prefer. So I put up some examples of these. So concentration. So concentration is a helpful state of mind, not just for meditation, but also in our life and in our work. If we have difficulty concentrating, then it's difficult to get our work done, and our mind keeps getting distracted. And even something like driving, you're driving your car. If you don't have good concentration on what you're doing, where you're going, the speed limit, and so on. If your mind is distracted, we know what can happen when people aren't concentrating. When they're driving, it can lead to disasters, people dying or severely injured. So concentration is a very important quality in many aspects of our life. But particularly in spiritual practice, in the practice of meditation, we need to be able to keep our mind focused on what we're doing. There's always an object when we do meditation. There's always something we meditate on. So it could be the breath, it could be an image of the Buddha, it could be a certain quality like loving kindness or compassion that we're trying to cultivate, or it could be something we're trying to understand, like impermanence or emptiness. So there's always something that is the object of our meditation. We call it the meditation object. And it's very important when practicing meditation that we keep our mind focused on that meditation object. Because if it isn't focused, it keeps jumping away, wandering away, then we won't get much out of our meditation. And so that's one of the good qualities we can develop, or helpful qualities that we can develop by training ourselves in meditation. Although it needs to be understood that concentration alone isn't enough. It's like a tool. It's one aspect of meditation, but it isn't the ultimate goal. Some people misunderstand that and think that, if you have really good concentration and you can keep your mind focused on your meditation object without wandering away for long periods of time, that somehow that itself is enough. And it can seem that way because, concentration brings some peace and some bliss. And it can feel really good to be concentrated. But what we strive for in Buddhism is, as I mentioned before, it's like these higher goals of nirvana and enlightenment. And to be able to attain those, we need to clear out our minds of all the junk, all the unwholesome, unhelpful states of mind like anger and ignorance and so on. And just concentration alone isn't enough, isn't sufficient to be able to do that. Even if you have really good concentration and you can stay single-pointedly focused on your object of meditation for a long period of time, that isn't enough to get rid of those negative states of mind. They just get kind of pushed aside or settled down. I like to think of the analogy of a glass of water. If you have a glass of water and maybe there's some dirt, some sand in the water, and if the glass is just sitting still on the table, not being touched or moved, then all of the dirt will settle down to the bottom. But it hasn't gone away. It's still there. So as soon as you pick up the glass and you move it around a little bit, then all the dirt will start moving around as well. So the dirt is still there, and it may not be visible when the water is sitting still. And so it's similar with our mind. There's a lot of dirt and debris and impure things in our mind, like anger and ignorance and greed and so forth. And when we're concentrating, even you may have very good concentration, all of that stuff just gets settled down, just like the dirt at the bottom of the glass. But then as soon as we get out of meditation and start, going around and being with people and doing things, then those negative attitudes can arise. I just read recently a story that's in the Buddhist tradition about one Indian meditator in the past, and he was staying maybe in a cave somewhere by himself and doing a lot of meditation, and he developed really, really, really good concentration. And then, one day he came down and went into the nearby town, and somebody stepped on his toe or something like that, and he just exploded with anger. So, that can show that, when you're all by yourself and doing a lot of meditation, your mind can get really calm and peaceful. But then if you haven't completely purified or eliminated your afflictive emotions, then something like that can happen, triggering off that emotion, and then it comes up again and your mind gets all distorted. Well, fortunately, he recognized that was a problem, so he went back to his cave to do some more work. But that's like a good illustration to show that concentration alone isn't enough. We need other things to do with our mind. But we do need to develop it. So it is one aspect of the practice of meditation. So then the second point under that is mindfulness and introspection. So these are other helpful qualities. Now mindfulness, there's different meanings of mindfulness. In the contemporary world, there's a lot of interest in mindfulness, and one description of what mindfulness is that it's just paying attention to the present moment in a non-judgmental way, something like that kind of quality of just being in the present, being aware of what's happening in the present in a non-judgmental way. So that's one meaning of mindfulness, but in Buddhism, there's a lot of other meanings of mindfulness, and it isn't just being present or being aware of what's happening in the present, but the real purpose of mindfulness in Buddhism is to be on the lookout for disturbing states of mind. So we need to, like I say, the real purpose of Buddhism is to work on transforming our mind, and that involves being able to recognize those aspects of the mind that are troublesome, that are disturbing, like anger. And so if anger is there in our mind, if it's arising in our mind, even in, it doesn't have to be full-blown raging anger, but even a feeling of irritation which can arise easily, even when we're meditating, right? A certain sound, or a certain odor, or a certain feeling in our body can trigger off a feeling of irritation, a feeling of, I don't like this, I don't want this, kind of rejection of that. So that's kind of a low-level experience of anger. Yeah, that's an afflictive state of mind, something we need to work on, we need to deal with and eventually become free of. And so we need to be able to recognize those aspects of our mind that are troublesome, that are afflicted, because they need to be purified, they need to be removed if we want to attain those higher goals of nirvana and enlightenment. And even if we're not working for those goals, these painful aspects of the mind cause problems in our life, right here and now. They are the source of suffering for us right now, and can also be the cause of suffering for others if we don't know how to manage them. So mindfulness and introspection, these two kind of come together. They're like a duo, a dynamic duo. And in the practice of meditation, the main meaning of mindfulness is remembering. The word for mindfulness in Pali and Sanskrit and Tibetan is the same word as remembering. And so it's explained that in meditation, mindfulness involves remembering our object of meditation and remembering what we're supposed to be doing. Otherwise, we forget. So when our mind wanders away from our object of meditation, that means we've forgotten it. We forgot that we're supposed to be paying attention to the breath, or meditating on loving kindness, or whatever it is we're supposed to be meditating on. We start off with that, and then we forget, and our mind wanders off to something else, here and there and everywhere. So when our mind wanders away, that means we've lost our mindfulness. Mindfulness has slipped, has lapsed, and we need to renew it by remembering our object of meditation, bringing our mind back to our meditation object. So that's the role of mindfulness, is remembering our meditation object and remembering what we're supposed to be doing when we're sitting there during meditation. And then introspection is actually the like a spy that's watching the mind. Spy maybe isn't a very good word, because that can have a negative connotation. Maybe security guard is better. it's helpful to have security guards in places like banks and other places where people might come along and try to make trouble, like try to rob the bank. So security guard has the job of just being there and looking around and checking out who's coming and going, and really trying to make sure that nobody causes trouble. So that's like the job of introspection. It's kind of watching the mind, what's going on in the mind. Is the mind doing what it's supposed to be doing? Or have I got caught up, fantasizing or thinking about somebody I don't like and getting all caught up in anger towards that person, or worry about my problems, those kind of things. That's not what we're supposed to be doing when we're meditating. But sometimes it can happen. I'm sure you all know. Our mind just gets carried away with something that we're not supposed to be doing. So introspection is an aspect of the mind that can notice that, detect that, and then deal with it and say, okay, there's something going on that shouldn't be happening. I need to deal with that. And sometimes dealing with it simply means letting go of it and coming back to our meditation object. But if it's more difficult, sticky, it doesn't want to go away, we may need to do something more than that. I'll talk more about that later, but it looks out for and deals with trouble, problems, interferences to our practice of meditation. But these qualities are helpful in our life as well. Yeah, not just in the context of meditation, but also in our life, in our work, in our interactions with others. It's helpful to have mindfulness, to be able to keep your mind focused on what you're supposed to be doing, and introspection, looking out for problems that could arise in your mind. It could lead to bigger problems if you don't deal with them. Okay, then there are other qualities. I've kind of listed a whole group of qualities: compassion, kindness, patience, generosity. So these are all kind of positive or virtuous qualities that are really helpful in our life and also in our spiritual practice. Compassion is wishing others to be free of suffering. So it's aware of the suffering of others and is moved by that suffering, touched by that suffering, wants to do something to relieve suffering. So we all have compassion. It's a human quality. Even animals. So there's stories of animals having compassion and taking care of other animals, even not their own offspring or their own species. So it's a really beautiful quality, because it's when, one person reaches out to another who is in need and does what they can to help them. So it's a very important quality in the Buddhist path, especially the Bodhisattva's path. It's absolutely essential. There's no way we can reach enlightenment without having compassion, and not just limited compassion for a limited number of people, but all living beings. So in Buddhism, we cultivate compassion for every living being without exception. We don't exclude anybody from compassion. So that's possible to do. It may sound impossible, but it isn't. It's just a question of practice and familiarity. And over time, one's compassion will grow more and more, and we can even feel compassion for those who in the past we may have felt anger or hatred towards. I was just reading a story yesterday in the news, really extraordinary. This woman, American woman, whose son had been beheaded by ISIS back in 2014. He was a journalist working in Iraq. He was captured and held hostage, and they wanted the American government to release some ISIS followers or ISIS fighters or pay a huge amount of money. So the government refused to do that. So the ISIS people beheaded this young man. And so there's been a long process, but the some of the people who were responsible for this horrific act were arrested and then eventually brought to America. And so one of those people was, he pleaded guilty. He pleaded guilty, so he didn't have to go to trial, but he was given a life sentence, life without parole. So the mother of this young man who'd been murdered, the journalist who'd been murdered, sat down and had a conversation with this murderer who was responsible for beheading her son. And she's talked with him for 4 hours. So that must have been quite extraordinary. And she's probably already gone through a lot of processing. And it was just really moving, some of the things she said. She said, talking to this man, listening to his story, she was able to feel pity for him. And I think she still, of course, felt some anger, but she said she was determined not to let herself be captive by her anger. And I thought that was a really extraordinary statement, just to recognize that if you hang on to anger and hatred and non-forgiveness, then that's like you become like a captive. I don't remember the exact words, but that was one of the words she used, a captive. She didn't want to be captive of these men who had murdered her son, but also of anger, of hatred. So I was quite impressed by what she said, and she said she's still working on it, working on overcoming her anger and her hatred, but at least to see that that's what she wants to do, that she's working on that. So how did I get into that? Compassion, yeah. So, yeah, we do not only for the sake of others, but also for ourselves. If we can develop compassion and overcome even feelings of anger and hatred, for those who caused us suffering, then that is beneficial for ourselves. So, yeah, that's the Buddhist view, is to, however hard it may be, to work on cultivating compassion for every living being, even those who've caused suffering to us or to our loved ones. And it is possible. It's not impossible. It's just a question of familiarity. And by the way, the word for meditation in Tibetan language has the meaning of familiarity or becoming familiar. And it's similar, the term for meditation in Sanskrit, bhavana, has the sense of cultivating. And so both of those terms mean that if we cultivate or make ourselves familiar with certain qualities, certain states of mind, certain ways of thinking, the more we get familiar with those, the more they become our natural way of thinking and feeling and being. And I don't know, for me, that's really helpful to understand that that's what we're doing when we're practicing meditation. We're making ourselves familiar with positive states of mind, helpful states of mind. And the more time we spend doing that, not just on the cushion in formal meditation sessions, but when we're out and about and being with people, interacting with people, reading things, listening to the news and so on, even in those situations, we can also be familiarizing ourselves with more positive ways of thinking and feeling and being. And the more we do that, the more that becomes our natural way of being. And those qualities just become easier and easier. So, yeah, and I do find that in my own experience. I can see huge changes from the way I was before and the way I am now. That, yeah, things like compassion and love and kindness and patience, these are much easier. They come more easily, more naturally, sometimes even spontaneously, without even having to, okay, I should be kind to this person. I should have compassion for this person. Sometimes it's just there. So, yeah, I'm really convinced from my experience that it does work. It does take time and effort and energy and regular practice, but definitely it works. And so, yeah, this is a big part of Buddhist practice. And in all spiritual traditions, they talk about these qualities of compassion and kindness and patience and generosity. So meditation is definitely a way of increasing those qualities, making them more part of our being, part of our life. And then wisdom, the last one on the list. So wisdom means understanding things as they are, the way things really exist. And this is a big part of Buddhism as well, because the Buddha realized that the root problem we have, the root cause of all of our suffering and also all the suffering in the world, is ignorance. Ignorance about the way things are, about the way things exist. We see things incorrectly, even opposite to how they really are. And so it's very important to cultivate wisdom, first by learning, reading the teachings, listening to teachings, thinking about them, and then meditating on them to have a deeper and deeper understanding and development of this quality of wisdom that sees things as they are rather than in a mistaken way. Just a simple example of that is impermanence. The Buddha talked a lot about impermanence, which basically means that things are changing. most of the things that we experience and interact with our own bodies and our minds and the bodies and minds of all the other people and beings in the world around us and all the material things in the world around us, both the things in nature like mountains and trees and oceans and rocks, and also the things produced by people, buildings and cars and highways and so on and so on, the food that we eat. And so all of these things are by nature impermanent, which means they're changing all the time. That's just their nature, is to change every minute, every second, every nanosecond, every tiny second. And we know this through science. We know that things are made of these tiny particles that are constantly in motion and changing. And so if the tiniest particles that make things up, if those are changing, then of course that means the bigger things are changing too. We just don't see it. We can't see the little particles moving and changing, but we know that they are. And because things are changing on that micro level, then there's also change on the macro level. So our bodies are changing all the time, getting older, unfortunately, as for many of us. We're subject to aging, and we don't like it when signs of age appear, like wrinkles and gray hair, and our hearing goes and our sight goes, and our brain isn't working as well as it used to. We can't remember things. We're more foggy. So these are just inevitable changes taking place on a macro level because of the micro changes taking place on the level of, the subatomic level and so on. And the same with all the things in the world around us. They are changing as well. That's just their nature. Their nature is to change. And sooner or later, all of these things will go out of existence. Our body's going to die. It's going to stop functioning, stop working. And our cars are going to die. Our houses are going to fall apart, and so on. So this is this impermanent nature of things is there. It's happening all the time, but we're normally not aware of it. We don't think about it. We don't take it into account. And instead, we tend to see things as if they are permanent, unchanging, as if they're going to be there forever. And if you find that surprising, and you may think, no, that's not true, I know about impermanence, but just check the way you react when you hear about somebody's death, like somebody you know, and you hear the news that that person has passed away, or even that they've been diagnosed with cancer or had a heart attack or something. It's like we're shocked, like, how could that happen? Yeah? So that kind of reaction shows that we don't really see things as impermanent, and instead we see things as if they are permanent, unchanging. And the same with our own bodies. We look in the mirror and we see, oh, that wrinkle wasn't there before, or look at all these gray hairs, Any feeling of surprise or disappointment we may have about those signs of impermanence show that, we don't really see things in that way. Instead, we see things as impermanent. And so, Buddha recommended that we contemplate impermanence. We meditate on impermanence. We get used to impermanence. And that's a kind of wisdom, the wisdom of impermanence, the wisdom that understands that that is the nature of things. And that's very helpful. It's a very helpful awareness to have. And then we won't be so surprised, so shocked, so upset when impermanence does happen in big ways. I like to tell this story of many, many years ago. I was living in Los Angeles, and there was a group of people up in Beverly Hills that had a little meditation group, and I would go up there once a week, and we would do a meditation together. And so at one point, there was heavy rain, and some of the houses in Beverly Hills slid down the hill, crashed, and fell apart. And So the next time I went to this meditation group, one of the members said that happened to him, that his house was one of the ones that slid down the hill with the rain and the mud. And he was pretty calm about it. He said, yeah, last week we meditated on impermanence. And so when this happened, he just said, oh, so this is impermanence. But he says his wife, who wasn't coming to the to the meditation group, wasn't so calm about it. She was very upset. So I thought, well, that shows that, yeah, getting some familiarity, even not the full-on wisdom or realization about it, but just some familiarity with thinking about impermanence can really help when things do happen in our life. Signs of impermanence happen. Okay, then the last bullet point I just talked already about, decreasing qualities that are unhelpful or even harmful. Anger, greed, anxiety, depression, envy, and so on. And so this is actually a huge subject, and we don't have time to go into it in this little weekend, but just to know that it's there within Buddhism. And so if you are sparked by interest in learning how to decrease these unhelpful qualities like anger and so on, and how to increase the helpful qualities like compassion. There's a huge amount of material in Buddha's teachings for how to do that. And in fact, that's the whole purpose of Buddhism. I've heard His Holiness the Dalai Lama mention that sometimes, that the essence of Buddhism is working on our mind and bringing about a transformation of our mind, in the sense of decreasing the negative, disturbing, unhelpful aspects of the mind, gradually decreasing them, and eventually it's possible to be free of them altogether, so that we no longer have anger or greed or selfishness or any of those painful, disturbing aspects of the mind. It's possible to be completely free of those. And then to cultivate the positive qualities, the compassion, the love, and joy, and wisdom, and so on. So those can be increased more and more and more until they're there all the time. They're ever present in a fully developed, fully perfected way. And that's actually the meaning of enlightenment, Buddhahood, when that comes about. And but like I say, that takes a long time to get to. But in the meantime, we, even now in this life, we can experience the benefits of meditation, decrease in the unhelpful qualities and increase in the helpful ones. So these are the real reasons or real purposes of practicing meditation in Buddhism. And nowadays, there are people who practice meditation for other reasons, such as health, dealing with pain, or dealing with stress, learning to be more relaxed, or dealing with disorders like sleep disorders, eating disorders, depression, and so on. So those are kind of more short-term and even maybe we could say worldly or materialistic goals. And they're not practicing meditation to develop their potential for nirvana and enlightenment. So there's probably a lot of discussion about that. And is it wrong for people to meditate in order to have those short-term goals? I don't think so. And I can't help but think that if the Buddha were alive today and we asked him, that he would say, no, that's okay. And in fact, there's a story. I heard this from Bhikkhu Analayo, Theravada scholar. He said there's a story in the Pali Canon. One of the Buddha's disciples was a king named Pasenadi, and he liked to eat and got overweight. So one day he came to see the Buddha, and he was kind of puffing and panting because, and and spoke to the Buddha about this problem, eating too much. And the Buddha gave him advice to practice mindfulness while he was eating. And he gave him a verse to use to, help himself stay mindful while he was eating. And this did help him to eat less. And so later he came to see the Buddha, and this time he had a nice new trim figure, and he was very pleased with his new figure. And probably his health was better as well. And so even the Buddha himself taught mindfulness to help somebody with their eating problem. And but it sounds like the king was very happy with the outcome of this practice, and it seemed to increase his appreciation of the Buddha. And I think that the same can happen nowadays as well. Even if people are practicing mindfulness just to feel better, healthier, more relaxed, and so on, and if they do find that it's beneficial, then that can increase their appreciation for meditation and the Buddhist teachings. They may want to learn other practices, other aspects of Buddhism. And also, even if that doesn't happen, they'll probably become nicer people through the practice of mindfulness or other kinds of Buddhist meditation, less likely to do harmful things to others. But then, on the other hand, I've also heard that mindfulness meditation has been taught to soldiers in the US military. Not always sure what the reason for that is, but one thing I heard was that it was believed that it would help them to be less prone to PTSD. So when they're on the bat, actually fighting, it can help them to avoid that. So that's a good use. I mean, if you do have to fight and be involved in military activities, it'd be helpful to have more mindfulness and not get stressed, and because that's so damaging. So anyway, there's a whole lot of discussion about this, and what's the right way to practice mindfulness, and so on. So I just wanted to share this. This is the Buddhist view of why we practice meditation. What's the real purpose, the real goal? So the next slide just shows the 7-point posture. I did explain that last night, but I'll go through it again quickly. So this is the best way of sitting for meditation to bring about the ideal results. But if you can't sit in this way, it's okay. You can you can make adjustments. Again, the legs crossed in whatever way is comfortable, or if you're sitting on a chair, have your feet flat on the floor. Hands on the lap, with the right on top of the left, and having your arms slightly away from your sides, not pressed against your sides. Back is straight as much as you can, and let your shoulders be even, not one higher than the other, and let them be as relaxed as possible, not tight and tense. Having your eyes open a little bit, and then looking downwards. So there's some light coming in, and that helps you to stay awake and alert during meditation, not fall asleep. And then mouth and jaw should be relaxed. Don't have your teeth clenched. So here again, mindfulness and introspection would be helpful, because sometimes things happen unconsciously. You might have a habit of clenching your jaw. And so if you notice that that's happening when you're meditating, then you can say to yourself, relax, just let that tension go. And then it's good to have the tongue on the upper palate, the roof of the mouth behind the upper teeth, just letting it rest there. That helps to decrease the flow of saliva and the need to swallow. And then the neck and head are tilted downwards slightly. They say if we have our head up like this, that can affect our mind and have more excitement, restlessness, distractions in our mind. But if we have our head down too far, then that can lead to sleepiness and dullness, laxity. I'll talk more about those problems later, but the mind can become a more kind of dark and heavy and unclear. So just slightly downwards, just a little bit down is the ideal position for the head and the neck. Okay, let's look at one more slide. The 4 components of a meditation session. So this is in the Tibetan tradition. What I've learned from my teachers. It's like 4 steps in the practice. So the first is to sit and try to sit in the 7-point posture if you can. But if any of those points are difficult for you, like, I don't know, some people may have back problems and so they're not able to really have a straight back, then you just do the best you can. If you can't sit cross-legged, you can sit on a chair. There's also these little benches that some people use that are slanted. So you kneel down and then sit on top of the bench. And some people are able to sit like that for long periods of time with little or no discomfort. So feel free to experiment with different ways of sitting, and hopefully you'll find one that's not too painful. And also different kinds of cushions. There's some cushions that are high and others are flatter, others are very hard like a rock, and others are softer. So, find what works best. Sometimes people have several cushions stacked up. Tibetans, I don't know how they do it, but they usually don't use any cushion at all. They just sit flat on the floor. So everyone's different. Every body is different. So experiment with different kinds of cushions, different heights of cushions and softnesses, and find one that works best for you. And also, if you're sitting on the floor, it's usually good to have some kind of mat under you rather than sitting on a hard surface. People sometimes have this experience of pins and needles or your legs going numb, which can be kind of unpleasant and distracting when you're meditating. So I find that if I have a mat or at least a blanket folded up under me, then that's less likely to happen. Or if you have a nice soft carpet, that helps. So it is important to be comfortable, not put yourself in a situation that's excruciatingly painful. But yeah, a comfortable position. And then the second step is motivation. And so we've already looked at that a little bit. And in our tradition, it's said that the best motivation to have for doing meditation is altruism, meaning caring about others and wanting to benefit others. So the highest motivation, the best motivation is said to be the wish to become a Buddha, a fully enlightened being, to be able to help all other living beings. That motivation is known as bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment. And usually it takes a while to learn and study and think about and check, is that really what I want to do? Is that really what I feel capable of doing? So initially you may not feel ready for that. But even just to think, like we did at the beginning of the session today, I do want to help others, and I want to help the world. I want to make things better, have less suffering. And if I practice meditation, then I can make more of a contribution to the world and to others. So that's a certain kind of altruism. So whatever you're able to manage. But then for some people, even thinking about helping others might be difficult. You may feel, I'm such a mess myself. I don't think I can help others, so I need to get myself together. That's why I'm meditating. And that's good too, because if you can work on yourself and get yourself in a better state of mind, a better way of being, then naturally you'll be helpful to others. You won't be as likely to cause problems to others or hurt others, and you'll probably feel more kindness and the wish to help others. So even just to think of helping yourself, in a way, is indirectly helping others. But we just have to make sure that we're not meditating for some negative reason. Like some examples might be wanting to learn meditation in order to develop powers that I can use to, manipulate other people or become wealthy. And I mean, it's possible. I heard about somebody who wanted to learn meditation and then become a sort of self-help guru, famous, making lots of money, charging lots of money for seminars and so on. So that's not a right motivation. That's quite egocentric and worldly. So we should try to make sure we don't have that kind of motivation. That's just seeking worldly fame, gain, or even harming others. And then meditate, number 3. So then your actual practice. And it's good to decide what kind of meditation you're doing. Like here we have many, many different types of meditation. And so it wouldn't be very helpful to say, okay, I think I'm going to meditate. And then you sit down and say, okay, what should I do? Oh, maybe I'll do this kind of meditation. And then after a few minutes, no, maybe I should do that kind of meditation. And then you switch. So you're constantly switching your meditation practice. So that's not good to do. It's good to determine before you start what you're going to do, which type of meditation you're going to do, and then focus on that and stick to that. And if you want to do another kind of meditation, do that at another time, later that day or tomorrow or whatever. So don't keep switching your meditation object or type of meditation in the middle of a session. And then the last point is dedicate. And so I mentioned this last night, and you probably heard it this morning as well, that when we do meditation, we are creating merit, positive energy. And that's the cause of happiness and the cause of spiritual growth. And so it's a Buddhist practice to share our merit with others, wishing that it will bring benefit, not just to oneself, but to others as well. And especially if we have the bodhicitta motivation, our goal is enlightenment to help all living beings, then we dedicate, at the end, we dedicate our merit to all living beings, to the attainment of enlightenment, to be able to help all living beings. So that's the best dedication to have, if that's comfortable for you. You can also, like if you know somebody who's sick or has recently died, you can also add specific dedications, like may that person recover from their sickness, or if they've died, may they have a fortunate rebirth, or something like that. So it's fine to have more other specific dedications of merit. So I'd like to then talk about one other thing which isn't on the slide, so we can stop that. Because last night, Sister Christine asked about pain and how to deal with pain. And so I thought to do a little meditation related to that, because some other people might be experiencing pain. We all do have it sometimes. So in my own experience, I've mainly been learning Buddhism from Tibetan lamas, and I can't recall reading or hearing any specific things that one should do when there's pain in meditation. It may have been there and I didn't pay attention to it because I myself didn't have much pain. I was able to sit right from the beginning, maybe because I did yoga. I started doing yoga when I was in college and university, and I would do it every day. So that definitely helps. I think it helps to do something like that, to do yoga, stretching, tai chi, and qigong may help as well. So I myself never had much problem with pain, and so I didn't need to learn how to deal with that. So in the Tibetan tradition, they do sometimes talk about how to deal with suffering in general, suffering and pain in general, not necessarily while sitting. They have lots of mind training practices. For example, if you yourself are suffering, you can think about the suffering of others, and that can help your compassion to expand. Like, oh, I'm not the only one who has pain. I'm not the only one who suffers. Lots of other people are suffering too. And may I be able to help them. So you can use it as a way of increasing your compassion. But I have encountered methods for dealing with pain in the other traditions, mainly the Theravada tradition. And in this book by Bhante Gunaratana called Mindfulness in Plain English, she has a whole section in there on dealing with pain that I found very helpful, and I do share it sometimes with others. So in general, he says that if we do have pain when we're meditating, we should see if there's a way of eliminating it. Do practical things, like maybe your pants are too tight, or your belt is too tight, or the cushion you're sitting on isn't right, or you need to see a doctor. I mean, there could actually be things you can do in a practical way to deal with the pain. So look into that. Look into those ways of dealing with pain. But even if we look into all of those things and deal with those things, there might still be pain. And he says we all do experience pain, at least sometimes, when we're meditating. And so there's things we can do on the mental level in to deal with pain. So he does say we can make pain the object of our meditation and observe it mindfully. And so he teaches this method of looking at pain, like there's a spot of pain in the body, and first relaxing all the muscles around it. Because he says one thing that happens kind of automatically is tension. That part of the body gets really tense. All the muscles tense up in that area. And that just increases the pain. So if we can focus there and then just consciously let go of that tightness, relax those muscles, that might relieve some of the pain. And then on top of that, he says our mind can also tighten up. And that means having thoughts like, oh, this is awful, this is terrible, maybe it's going to last forever, maybe it's going to get worse, and those kind of thoughts, fear and worry, and having those kind of thoughts, those kind of mental reactions to the pain can also make it worse. And so with mindfulness, working both on the physical level and on the mental level, and relaxing any tension there may be, that those things can help to release the pain. So let's do a little bit of meditation on this and see how it might work. Make yourselves comfortable. Sit in comfortable position for meditation. So I'm going to ask you to focus on a feeling of pain. And some of you may not have any pain right now. You could use just maybe a feeling of discomfort or tightness in your body. He says you can also use it for emotional pain. And once you learn how to do this, you can also use it with, say, a painful emotional feeling like sadness or anxiety or whatever. So you might have that kind of experience in your mind, and you could use that as the example. Okay, so let yourself relax. And then check to see if there's a spot of pain or at least discomfort somewhere in your body. It doesn't have to be super strong. It could be something mild. And put your awareness at that place. And try to avoid any resistance, any sense of, oh, I don't want to look at that, I don't want to feel that, that's terrible, I want to run away from it. So just open your mind, open your awareness to it, just be with it. And he says, you might notice two things. There's the pain itself, and then there's resistance to it. Resistance to the pain. And the resistance can be on the physical level. That means muscles in that area tightening, tensing. So see if you can relax those muscles. Relax all the muscles around that place of pain. An easy way to do that is to just tell yourself, relax. Focus on that tight muscle and say, relax. Or you can imagine breathing into it, letting the breath loosen it, relax it. So doing that might lessen the pain. And he says there could also be mental resistance to pain. And that can be thoughts or feelings of, I don't want this, I don't like this is terrible, wanting it to go away. See if you can notice that kind of thought or feeling. And understand these are just thoughts, feelings. They're just momentary mental events that come and go. They're not permanent. They're like clouds going through the sky. So let them go and just see if you can be with the experience of pain itself without those extra thoughts and feelings. Just observe the raw sensations in that place. And you might notice those sensations are changing, shifting. Sometimes it might be stronger or weaker. Sometimes it might be sharp or mild. Just have a attitude of curiosity, inquisitiveness, wanting to understand what's really going on there, being open to what's actually there. And continue breathing. So just having a steady rate of breathing, that too can bring some relief to the pain. Now check to see if doing those exercises has had any effect on the pain. Is it still as bad as before, or has it lightened, lessened? Or has your mind become more relaxed, more accepting of it? So we're now at the end of the session, and we can take a few moments to make a mental dedication of the positive energy we've created during this session, generating a positive motivation at the beginning and spending this time listening, thinking, and doing a little bit of meditation. So we've definitely created some good energy, merit. So let's now share this merit with all other beings. May it bring peace, happiness, freedom from suffering, and ultimately enlightenment.